Reflection. What happens when a woman remembers her name, not the name whispered by the world, but the one etched in stars? This, the divine power of a woman who knows her. She rises not in noise, reflection, but in not in armor, but in awareness. She wears no crown, yet mountains bend when she walks. Ask yourself, have you ever felt the storm quiet when she entered the room? Reflection. Have you ever seen how she turns silence into sanctuary? Her knowing is not loud, it hums. In the way she plants seeds no one notices. In the way her absence echoes deeper than most voices. Pause. Reflection. Do you know a woman like this? Or better, are you the woman still waiting to remember yourself? She does not need to be told she is powerful. She is the map and the compass. Reflection. The wind and the breath. When she laughs, galaxies realign. When she weeps, rivers find their direction. When she speaks, roots listen. This is no myth. This is your aunt, your sister, reflection, your grandmother. This is the stranger on the bus, the warrior in the mirror. Her power is not for show. It is for healing, for birthing light, for saying no without apology, reflection, for holding the broken with hands that remember wholeness. Let me tell you something that many will try to convince you is not true. Reflection. A woman who knows herself, really knows herself, has no need to chase power because she is power. Not the kind that clangs and commands from a stage, not the kind that begs for applause, reflection, not the kind that's fragile and must constantly prove itself. No, her power is rooted. It does not wave like a flag. It grows like a forest. And forests don't ask to be seen. They just are. Reflection. She doesn't memorize her worth from books or likes or the opinions of strangers. She remembers it from bone memory, from ancient echoes in her spine. Because when she was born, reflection, the universe didn't hesitate. It carved her with exact hands. It placed inside her a map, not of roads, but of truths. And every truth leads her back to herself. But somewhere along the way, reflection, she was taught to forget, taught that her knowing was dangerous, taught that her silence was survival. And so she began listening to everything but her own voice. Reflection. She learned to shrink where she should have stood, to apologize for being fire when they wanted steam, to doubt what she felt in favor of what made others feel comfortable. But here's the miracle, reflection. The truth, no matter how deeply buried, does not die, it sleeps. And when she begins to stir, to question, to ache for something unnamed, that's not confusion, that's awakening. Reflection, that's the divine whisper rising again, saying calm, you've always known the way. Have you ever felt that? That strange electricity in your skin when you finally said no. Reflection, that quiet tear that fell not from weakness, but from finally seeing yourself. That was not breakdown, that was breakthrough. That was your soul recognizing its reflection, because knowing yourself is not just some self-help slogan. It is the most radical, unshakable foundation a woman can stand on. It is the end of pretending. It is the return of instinct, reflection. It is the moment she stops needing permission to exist as she is. She begins to see herself in full form, not as parts, not as fragments, not as daughter only, or lover only, or mother only, reflection, but as being, as force, as witness, as whole. And with this knowing comes the greatest shift. She no longer begs to be chosen. She chooses. She no longer chases peace. She is peace. Reflection. She walks into a room and no longer scans it for approval. Instead, she brings her own presence. She no longer waits for the world to offer her a seat. She builds her own table, reflection, and blesses those who come in truth. And here's what they don't always tell you. This knowing is not arrogant. It is sacred. It does not lift her above others. Reflection. It brings her closer to everyone because when you know yourself, you finally recognize the divine in everyone else too. She becomes less interested in competition, more in connection. Reflection. She stops asking, am I enough? And starts asking, what do I want to create from this enoughness? She listens more. To her soul, her body, to the earth. Reflection. She does not need loudness to feel heard. She does not need comparison to feel beautiful. She does not need power plays to feel powerful because she has already returned to her body, reflection, to her spirit, to her knowing. And that return, it changes everything. It changes how she loves. It changes how she speaks. It changes what she tolerates, what she believes, reflection, and what she no longer fears. She becomes the voice she waited for, the fire she used to chase, the sanctuary she used to dream of. And that kind of woman, you don't just notice her. Reflection, you remember her. She awakens something in you, something ancient, something real. So let me ask you, wherever you are, have you started to remember yet? Reflection, have you looked in the mirror not for flaws, but for the truth behind your eyes? Have you felt that gentle pull back to yourself? Because if you have, even once, reflection, you already know, let me tell you something about presence. Real presence. Not the kind you wear like perfume or perform like a speech. Not something rehearsed or curated or filtered. Reflection, but something you carry, something you are. A woman who knows herself doesn't have to announce her arrival. The air adjusts for her. The room listens even before she speaks. Flexion. She doesn't need to wave banners. She doesn't need to push past others to be seen. She doesn't even need to be loud. Reflection. Because she understands something most have forgotten. Power is not always found in volume. Sometimes it's found in stillness. Sometimes it's found in how she stands, in how she breathes. Reflection. In how she listens so deeply that others remember how to listen too. You know the kind of woman I'm talking about. The one who walks into a room and nothing looks different. Reflection. But everything feels different. She brings peace, but not passivity. She brings clarity, but not control. She has nothing to prove. And that's what makes her undeniable. Reflection. People talk about charisma like it's magic, like it's rare. But presence, true presence is not magic. It's alignment. It's a soul sitting comfortably inside a body. Flexion. A heart that isn't apologizing for its rhythm. A mind that doesn't need to dominate, only to understand. She does not shrink herself to avoid being too much. Reflection, nor does she inflate herself to appear strong. She just, and in her nest, others begin to question the masks they wear. Because her authenticity stirs something in them. Reflection. And that is her quiet revolution. She doesn't command a room by force. She invites it to soften, to settle, to feast. She doesn't interrupt to be heard. She waits until words are needed. Flexion. And when they come, they land, not because she shouts, but because she means every syllable. Her words carry weight not from force, but from depth. Reflection. How many people have you known who speak constantly and say nothing? And how many speak little, but when they do, you feel it for days? She's one of the latter. She doesn't perform wisdom. Flexion. She doesn't decorate herself in borrowed truths. She lives what she knows. And so when she speaks, there's no glitter, no noise, no trying. There's only resonance. There's only truth. Reflection. There's only that feeling you get like something ancient inside you just got named. This is the kind of presence that doesn't age. It deepens. It expands. It moves through generations. Reflection. It's why you remember your grandmother's hands. Why a stranger's nod once gave you strength. Why a silent hug sometimes says more than 1,000 speeches. She is not trying to impress you. Flexion. She is not selling herself. She is being. And that being, it creates space. It gives permission. Because when a woman shows up in her fullness, flexion, she doesn't take from the room, she grounds it. People sit straighter, people speak more honestly, people feel safer. And the funny thing is, she's doing anything on purpose. Reflection, she's just present, no pretense, no polish, no performance, just a quiet, unwavering knowing I am here. I am enough. I do not need to earn the right to be. And maybe that sounds simple, flexion, but in a world that constantly demands we prove ourselves, that kind of presence is radical. In a world addicted to speed, to noise, to spectacle, her calm is resistance. Flexion, her steadiness is revolution. Her softness is not weakness. It is precision. It is a choice. And that choice ripples. Flexion, people remember her not because she dazzled them, but because she made them feel more like themselves. She didn't dominate the space. She expanded it. She didn't take the spotlight. Reflection. She became the quiet sun that lit the whole scene. And now I'll ask you, have you ever been in the presence of someone like that? Or better yet, have you ever felt yourself becoming her? Reflection, you'll know it when your silence starts speaking louder than your noise. When your calm unsettles what's false around you. When your mere presence becomes your power. And sometimes, flexion, when we speak of power, of divinity, of deep feminine knowing, the world gets a little uncomfortable. It lifts its head, squints, tilts, searching for a goddess wrapped in gold. Flexion floating somewhere above, draped in mythology. But here's the truth. The divine is not out of reach. It is not locked in temples or sealed in scripture. It is in the hands that chop onions after a long day. In the baggage of a woman standing at a stove, still feeding others before herself. In the way she notices what others overlook. Reflection, we've made the mistake of imagining divinity as distant. Of seeing goddesses in paintings but not in people. Of naming the sacred in the sky. Reflection, but ignoring it in the sister who lends you her last ounce of strength. But divinity, it lives right here, in the ordinary, in the woman next door who keeps going quietly with no applause. Flexion, in the teacher who buys her own chalk because the school budget forgot her. In the auntie who tells stories that sound like lullabies but hold survival. We keep waiting for miracles. Flexion, not realizing the woman who raised you as one. Not seeing the way a friend holding your hand at your lowest is performing a prayer no religion can define. Do you see it now? Flexion, the divine feminine isn't found only in statues. It's found in a weary woman's laugh, in her refusal to break when the world keeps asking her to. Reflection, in the way she creates beauty even when surrounded by ruins. We've mistaken magic for spectacle, but the real magic is subtle. It's found in presence, in endurance, reflection, in the rhythm of her everyday. She may never be called sacred. She may never be crowned, but she carries something ancient in her spine, something soft but not small, something quiet, reflection, but not weak, and it pulses through everything she touches. Her home becomes sanctuary. Her meals become offerings. Her words become balm, reflection, not because she's trying, because that's who she is. She may not speak in poetry, but her life is a poem. Each scar, a stanza. Each sacrifice, a line of verse written in silence. Reflection, each smile after grief, a holy refrain. And yes, she has flaws. She gets tired. She forgets herself. Sometimes she yells, times she withdraws. But don't mistake that for failure. Reflection, don't ever confuse that with absence of power. Because divinity does not mean perfection. It means presence. It means choosing to show up even when you feel invisible. It means creating life, reflection, art, healing, hope over and over again without waiting for a thank you. And the beautiful, almost painful truth is the world rarely tells her she's divine. Reflection, it doesn't hand her awards for her emotional labor. It doesn't write history books about the way she held a family together with one paycheck and a worn-out heart. But we see her, reflection, we feel her. And when we remember to slow down and look closely, we realize she's been holding the world up piece by piece. So maybe today you won't find her on a pedestal, reflection, but you will find her in the mirror if you look long enough. In the friend who calls just to say, reflection, you cross my mind. In the stranger who lets someone go ahead in line without expecting a nod. This is her realm, not the thunderclap, but the heartbeat. Not the grand gesture, reflection, but the daily one. Not the fame, but the faith that what she is matters, even if no one ever writes it down. So I want you to pause right now. Think of her. The woman who stayed, reflection. The woman who tried. The woman who kept love alive when no one else remembered how. The woman who folded herself into someone else's healing. Now ask yourself, have you thanked her? Or maybe, reflection, have you recognized that she is you? There is a kind of power that doesn't roar. It doesn't wear medals. It doesn't ask for attention or validation or defense. Reflection, it simply knows a woman who has returned to herself walks differently in the world. Not just with confidence, but with authority. It's not borrowed authority, reflection. Not one handed to her by a title or a role, but the kind that comes from her bones, the kind passed through generations. From the grandmother who whispered prayers over hot coals, reflection, to the mother who cried into her pillow but still rose before dawn. This kind of power isn't taught in school, it's remembered. And once remembered, it cannot be taken away. Reflection, she doesn't need to yell to be heard. She doesn't need to defend her knowing. She feels truth in her body. She hears it in silence. She trusts it even when it makes no sense to the world. Reflection, and when she trusts it, when she stops asking the world to confirm what her spirit already told her, that's when she becomes untouchable. Reflection, there is a sacred intelligence that runs through her. It isn't logical, but it's wise. It doesn't always have answers, but it always has direction. It speaks in symbols and dreams, reflection and hunches and sudden stillness. And she listens, not because she was trained to, but because she's tired of being talked out of what she knows. Reflection, she knows when something is wrong before it's said. She knows when to walk away, even if no one else understands why. She knows when to rest, even when the world says hustle. Reflection, she knows when to speak and when to let silence speak for her. This is her gift. Her knowing is not just instinct. It is lineage. It is spiritual memory. Reflection, it is soul muscle built over centuries of being ignored, overlooked, doubted, but never extinguished. And when she finally stops arguing with that inner voice, when she finally says, reflection, I believe you, to herself, she reclaims what was always hers. Do you feel that? That tug in your gut that doesn't come with an explanation, but refuses to be dismissed. Reflection, that sudden rush in your chest when something aligns. That moment you look at someone and you just know. That's not random. That's not imagination. That's guidance. Reflection, that's your soul's compass. And she listens, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs her something, even when it takes her into unknown places. Reflection, because her trust in that voice, that inner flame, is stronger than her fear of being misunderstood. She has nothing to prove. She simply moves in alignment. Reflection, and alignment is louder than any performance. This spiritual authority, it doesn't separate her from the world. It weaves her deeper into it. She becomes the one others come to for clarity, not because she's perfect, but because she's rooted. She doesn't get swept away by chaos. She doesn't rush to fix what she knows needs space. She doesn't panic when things fall apart. Reflection, because she knows sometimes destruction is just preparation for something more honest. And no, she doesn't always have the answers, but she always has presence. Reflection, and presence often heals more than advice ever could. So she walks slowly, speaks deliberately, holds eye contact longer than expected, laughs without restraint, cries without apology, flexion. Because when she lives in spiritual authority, she doesn't compartmentalize her being. She brings all of herself, the soft and the sharp, the wild and the wise, the joy and the grief. Reflection. She is not trying to become someone. She is simply returning to who she has always been beneath the noise. And people will ask her, how do you know? And she will say, I don't. I just do, not to be cryptic, not to be mystical, reflection, but because explaining soul, deep knowing to someone still living only in the mind, is like describing color to someone who's never opened their eyes. Reflection. So now I ask you, if you stop to listen to that voice inside you, not the loud one that lists your flaws, not the anxious one that fears judgment, but the deep one, the still one, reflection, the one that says, you already know. And here's something most people never tell you. Child woman's voice is not just her sound eyes. It is her power of presence, her truth, flexion. And for too long, too many women have been trained to silence it. Not just the voice that comes from her mouth, but the voice that rises in her chest when she disagrees. Reflection, the voice that whispers no when everyone else says dies. The voice that trembles when it's tired of pretending to be okay. Flexion, the voice that screams inside her when the world expects her to smile and stay small. Flexion, we've all seen it, how young girls are praised for being quiet and well-behaved, how women are told they're too emotional, too sensitive, too loud, reflection, too much. And so they learn to hesitate, to shrink, to bite their tongue until it bleeds truth. But there comes a moment, and if you felt it, flexion, when she cannot keep her mouth shut anymore, not because she wants to argue, but because the silence is killing her faster than the risk of being misunderstood. And in that moment, reflection, something sacred happens. She begins to speak, not for approval, not to be liked, but because her voice was never meant to be caged. She speaks because her story is not a burden. Reflection, it is a blueprint, a map that someone else may need to find their way out. She speaks because someone has to say the thing that's been sitting in the room, heavy and unnamed. Flexion, she speaks because silence has been weaponized against women for generations, because entire lineages have carried secrets that became sickness, because pretending has worn out its welcome. Reflection, when she finally speaks, not from performance, but from a place so real it rattles her bones, everything changes. She might shake. Her voice might quiver. Flexion. Her words may come out rough or raw or imperfect, but they come out, and that releases resurrection. Because when a woman speaks her truth, flexion, she is not just freeing herself, she is opening the door for others. She is saying, reflection, you are not crazy, you are not alone. You are not the only one who has carried this weight in silence. And yes, there will be people who won't be ready for her voice. Reflection, people who will try to shame it, dismiss it, twist it. But she no longer speaks for them, she speaks for herself. She speaks for the girl she used to be. Flexion, she speaks for the women who still can't. She speaks because her voice is not a performance, it is proof that she is alive. Flexion, and let's be clear, this isn't always about standing at a podium or writing a book. Sometimes speaking your truth looks like saying, I don't agree, or this hurts, or reflection, I'm not available for that anymore. It can be a soft no or a loud hell yes. It can be a tear rolling down your cheek that says more than words ever could. Reflection. It can be walking away without needing to explain. Your voice is every time you honor your truth instead of betraying it. Reflection. And when women do that, when they start using their voices not just to survive but to lead, the atmosphere changes. They don't need permission. They don't wait for consensus. Reflection. They stop editing themselves for comfort. They become disruptors. And healing often starts with disruption. Reflection. So let me ask you something. Where have you silenced yourself for the sake of keeping peace? And what would happen if you finally gave your voice the room it's been aching for? Reflection. Your truth doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be yours. Sometimes we talk about strength like it's all sharp edges, like it's muscle or hustle, or the refusal to bend. Reflection. But there's a kind of strength that's different. It doesn't shout. It doesn't flex. It doesn't need to be loud or hard or impenetrable. Reflection. It's the strength to stay as soft in a world that keeps trying to harden you, to remain open when you've been wounded, to keep your heart available after disappointment. Reflection. To choose kindness when bitterness would be easier. That is the strength people underestimate most. Because let's be honest, it takes nothing to shut down, nothing to build walls. Reflection. Nothing to pretend you don't care. But it takes everything, every ounce of courage, to feel deeply and still choose to show up with love. Flexion. A woman who knows herself doesn't become cold to protect herself. She learns how to hold her softness with strength. She doesn't let the world dictate how guarded she should be. Reflection. She chooses how open she remains. And that choice made again and again, that's sacred. She has cried through nights where no one heard her. She's learned that tears are not weakness, reflection. They are evidence that her spirit is still alive. She's loved people who couldn't love her back. But instead of turning bitter, she grew boundaries. Not as fences to keep everyone out, reflection, but as gates that open only for what honors her peace. She's been disappointed. Yes, she's been betrayed. Absolutely. But she didn't let those moments define her identity. Reflection, she let them shape her clarity. So now she's not naive. She's discerning. She doesn't close her heart. She just listens more carefully to who deserves access to it. Reflection, her softness is not a liability. It is her compass. It's how she senses the energy in a room. It's how she notices the pain behind someone's smile. Reflection, it's how she leads, not with dominance, but with presence. We've created this myth that to be powerful, a woman must sacrifice her softness, as if tenderness can't lead. Reflection, as if compassion isn't radical. But the woman who can sit in the storm and still extend grace, that's a woman who terrifies systems built on control. Because she cannot be turned cruel. Reflection, because she remembers who she is even when others forget their humanity. She doesn't use her softness to please. She uses it to heal. She doesn't let it make her a martyr. Reflection, she lets it make her a mirror, reflecting back the parts of others they've long abandoned. And that's why people feel seen in her presence. Not judged, not managed, not fixed. Reflection, just witnessed. She knows her softness is where her wisdom lives. It's where intuition speaks. It's where creativity flows. It's where love doesn't perform, reflection, but just exists. And when the world tries to shame her for it, tries to call her weak, too sensitive, too emotional, she doesn't argue. She just smiles. Reflection, because she's made peace with being misunderstood by people who've never dared to feel that deeply. She knows softness doesn't mean submission. It means sovereignty. Reflection, it means choosing not to become what hurt you. It means saying, yes, I see how cruel the world can be. Yes, I've been cracked open more times than I can count. But no, I will not close. Reflection, because my open heart is not your casualty. It's my revolution. So I'll ask you this, where have you hardened that used to be soft? Reflection, and what would happen if you gave yourself permission to melt again? There comes a point in a woman's life when she no longer waits. Not for validation, not for permission. Reflection, not for someone to rescue her from the dreams she's been quietly burying beneath responsibility. She stops looking over her shoulder for someone to tell her it's okay to begin. Reflection, she just begins. That is the moment her divine power sharpens, when she starts choosing herself, not in a way that abandons love, reflection, but in a way that includes her in the love she so freely gives to everyone else. Reflection, she realizes that the life she's been waiting to live isn't waiting for the right time. It's waiting for her to say, I'm ready now. Saying maybe she doesn't feel ready. Reflection, maybe she's been conditioned to put herself last, to be modest, to be grateful for crumbs. But still, she moves. She makes the call. She writes the first page. Reflection, she starts the business. She ends the relationship. She packs the suitcase. She sets the boundary. She takes the class. She speaks the truth. Reflection, she shows up in the room where she used to make herself invisible. She doesn't wait for the fear to disappear. She simply stops letting it dictate the terms of her life. And when she does this, reflection, when she finally chooses herself, she finds that the world doesn't collapse. The people who truly love her don't leave. Her dreams don't punish her for being late. Reflection, they open like arms that had been waiting all along. She begins to notice how often she once apologized for being too ambitious, too quiet, too much, too tired, too honest. Reflection, and now she simply is. She doesn't apologize anymore for needing rest, for saying no, for desiring more. Because choosing herself doesn't mean she's selfish. Reflection, it means she has remembered she exists. And when she chooses herself, she also chooses alignment. She no longer tolerates relationships that drain her. Reflection, she no longer says yes to things that make her soul shrink. She no longer over-explains her decisions to people committed to misunderstanding her. She learns to say, reflection, that's not for me, without guilt. She learns to walk away without leaving pieces of herself behind. And it's not easy. Choosing herself often means disappointing others. Reflection, it means releasing the version of her that was built around approval. It means grieving the woman who spent years being everything to everyone except herself. Reflection, but she understands now that was survival. This is liberation. She doesn't need everyone to agree with her journey. She just needs to stay honest with herself. Reflection, she doesn't need every step to be perfect. She just needs to keep walking in the direction of what feels true. And the world begins to shift. Reflection, people start responding to her differently, not because she's changed entirely, but because she finally stopped dimming her light to make them comfortable. She radiates from the inside now. Reflection. She isn't chasing anything. She's becoming. And when other women see her do this, when they see her boldly choosing herself without shame, they start to wonder if maybe they can too. Reflection. Her courage becomes contagious. Her healing becomes a permission slip. Her decision to stop waiting becomes a movement. So I ask you, what would happen if you chose yourself today? Reflection, not in 5 years, not after everything is perfect, not once everyone else is okay, but now. What would happen if you stopped waiting for someone to pick you and picked yourself instead? Reflection. And finally, there is a moment every woman comes to where all the pieces she's gathered, all the truths she's remembered, all the pain she's alchemized into power. Reflection, bring her to one undeniable realization: she was never becoming someone else. She was always returning to herself. The world told her to chase, to climb, to achieve. Reflection, to shape, shift into what others would accept, to trade her depth for likability, her truth for applause, her knowing for instruction. And for a while, she may have listened. Reflection, she may have spent years trying to fit in rooms she was never meant to shrink herself into, may have spoken in voices not her own, may have dimmed the fire just to be allowed to stay. Reflection, but eventually she gets tired, not tired in her body, tired in her soul, tired of leaving parts of herself behind just to feel safe, tired of being praised for being what she is not. Reflection, tired of the mask, the rehearsed smiles, the quiet swallowing of truth. And in that sacred exhaustion, she surrenders. Reflection, not to defeat, but to honesty. She starts walking backward through her life, gathering the pieces she left behind in other people's expectations. Reflection, she reclaims her voice from when she silenced it for peace. She pulls her worth out of places it never belonged. Reflection, she writes her name on the parts of herself she once called too much. And what happens? She begins to remember, not in her mind, but in her body. Not as facts, reflection, but as truth. She remembers the way her laughter used to come so easily before shame taught her to hold back. She remembers how her body once moved before it was measured and managed. Reflection, she remembers how her heart felt before it was guarded with barbed wire. She remembers the version of herself who was wild, curious, intuitive, whole. And she welcomes her back. Reflection, not to go back in time, but to move forward in A's integrity, where she stops chasing the woman she thinks she should be and starts honoring the woman she's always been. Reflection, because now she sees divine power isn't about reaching some flawless version of self. It's about remembering the truth of self beneath all the noise. Reflection, she is not someone else's version of beautiful. She is not defined by what she's accomplished or what she's survived. She is not just a role to perform, a box to fit, a label to wear. Reflection, she is herself, the fully, finally, unapologetically. And what a force that is. A woman who has returned to herself cannot be controlled. Reflection, because she no longer controls herself to make others comfortable. She knows what she carries. She knows what she's worth. She knows how to listen to her soul over the static. Reflection, she no longer rushes. She no longer begs. She no longer waits to be told she's enough. And it is in that wholeness, not perfection, reflection, but that wholeness, that her divine power becomes undeniable, because she didn't find it in a book. She didn't earn it through performance. She didn't buy it or borrow it. She remembered it. Reflection. So I'll ask you, as we stand here in this space we've built together, what would it feel like to come home to yourself today? Not the version others want. Reflection. Not the one you've curated for acceptance, but the one that's been waiting for your full presence all along. So here we are, together in this moment of truth. We've talked about her voice, reflection, her boundaries, her softness, her return. But above all, we've spoken of her divine power, not as something she has to earn or prove, reflection, but something she's always carried in her bones. A woman who knows herself is not dangerous because she is wild. Reflection, she is dangerous because she is rooted, because she doesn't just walk into a room. She grounds it. She doesn't just speak, she awakens. And now the question is no longer reflection. Can she? The question is, will she? Will she rise without apology? Will she soften without shame? Will she lead without imitation? Reflection, will she remember who she is without waiting for the world to validate it? That is her power. That is your power. Reflection. And if something inside you stirred while listening to this, if your chest tightened, if your eyes welled up, if your soul whispered, yes, then that wasn't just inspiration. Reflection, that was remembrance. So tell me now, what part of you is ready to come alive again? Let her.